Brooksville was a quiet little town where nothing much happened. The streets were small, lined with shops that closed early in the evening, and the people who lived there enjoyed talking about others more than about themselves. A new haircut, a fresh coat of paint on a neighbor's house, or even a different color of curtains could keep the town buzzing for days. Everyone knew everyone else's business, and no secret stayed hidden for long. So when Maria brought home a rusty old 1955 Cadillac and parked it outside her small house, the whole town started whispering. The car stood out like a sore thumb. It was huge, with its long body and sharp fins, but the beauty it might have once had was now buried under years of dust and rust. The paint had faded to a dull, tired shade. The chrome edges were no longer shiny, and the tires looked older than most people in town. At first, the children laughed whenever they walked past Maria's house. They pointed at the Cadillac and called it names. The grown-ups were not much kinder. They shook their heads wondering why Maria, a sensible young woman who worked at the bakery, would waste her money on what they saw as nothing more than a broken piece of metal. At the corner store, a man muttered to his friend, "That car belongs in a junkyard, not on Main Street." Even at the bakery where she worked, some customers teased her kindly, asking if she needed help pushing it down the road when it stopped running. Maria never argued. She only smiled softly, nodded, and continued with her work. She had always been quiet, polite, and respectful. People liked her bread, they liked her smile, but they could not understand her strange choice. To them, the Cadillac was a mistake. To her, it was something more. Maria had first seen the car at the edge of town, hidden behind an abandoned farmhouse. The weeds had grown tall around it, and most people would have walked past without noticing. But something about it caught her eye. The car looked forgotten, yes, but not lost. It felt as though it was waiting, as if someone had once loved it deeply and left behind a part of their life inside it. Maria had stood there for a long time that day, her hand resting on the roof of the Cadillac, feeling a strange pull in her chest. She did not know why, but she decided she could not leave it behind. She arranged to buy it and brought it home. From that moment on, the car became part of her days. After work at the bakery, she often sat in the Cadillac with the windows down, listening to the evening breeze. The cracked leather seats smelled of dust and age, but sometimes, if she sat still enough, she could sense something else, a faint sweetness in the air like old perfume. She would close her eyes and wonder who had once driven this car, who had laughed inside it, who had leaned back in the seats while the world passed by. One evening, just as the sun began to dip behind the low hills and the street lamps flickered on, Maria decided it was time to clean the car properly. She carried out a bucket of warm soapy water, a rag, and an old lantern. She placed the lantern on the sidewalk, rolled up her sleeves, and began to scrub. At first the water turned black with dirt, but slowly, bit by bit, the Cadillac's old color began to show. The paint, once dull, revealed itself to be a deep red, tired but still proud beneath the years of neglect. The neighbors passing by gave her strange looks, but Maria kept scrubbing. She hummed softly as she worked, lost in her own world. Hours passed, and the car began to look less like a forgotten wreck and more like a tired giant waking up after a long sleep. When she finally climbed into the back seat to dust it, her hand brushed against something unusual. At first, she thought it was just a hard part of the seat frame, but when she pressed again, she felt a slight give, as if a section of the seat was not fixed in place. Curious, she leaned closer and pushed harder. To her surprise, a small panel shifted. Her breath caught. She pulled at it gently, and the panel slid aside, revealing a narrow compartment built into the seat frame. Her heart began to beat faster. She had never seen anything like this before. Inside the compartment rested a small metal box. It was scratched and old, its edges rough from years of being hidden, but it was still strong and heavy in her hands. Maria sat in the back seat, staring at the box under the glow of the lantern. The street outside was quiet, the only sound being the chirping of crickets in the night. She felt a shiver of excitement mixed with fear. She had no idea what the box contained. It could hold something worthless, or it could hold something important. Either way, she knew it had been hidden for a reason. Slowly, with trembling hands, Maria lifted the lid. What she saw inside made her eyes widen, and she froze in silence. She did not fully understand what it meant yet, but one thing was clear in her heart. Whatever this box carried had the power to change more than just her own life. It had the power to change the story of the entire town. Maria sat in the back seat of the Cadillac, holding the small metal box close to her chest. The lantern's glow made her shadow stretch across the cracked leather seats, and the whole moment felt unreal. She had only bought the car because something about it called to her, but now she was sure there was a deeper reason. Her fingers shook as she placed the box on her lap. She leaned closer, studying it carefully. The box was rectangular, made of dark metal that had scratches and dents all over it, but the lock was still strong. At first she tried to open it with her nails, but it would not budge. She pressed her ear against it, half expecting to hear something rattle inside, but there was only silence. Finally, she remembered her father's old toolkit in the shed. She hurried out of the car, the lantern swinging in her hand, and went to fetch it. The night air was cool and the small town was quiet. A dog barked in the distance, but otherwise all she could hear was the sound of her own footsteps. When she returned with a screwdriver and a small hammer, she placed the lantern on the floor of the Cadillac and began working on the lock. Her hands were steady now, her curiosity stronger than her fear. After several attempts, the lock finally gave way with a faint click. She held her breath and slowly lifted the lid. Inside the box was a bundle of old papers carefully tied together with a faded ribbon. Beneath them lay a small notebook with a leather cover, worn out but still intact. At the very bottom of the box was something wrapped in a piece of cloth. Maria picked up the papers first. The edges were yellowed with age, and the writing on them was in neat, careful handwriting. She unfolded the first page and began to read. It was a letter. The words spoke of promises, secrets, and hidden truths. As she read further, her eyes widened. The letter spoke about money that had been hidden away long ago, money meant for the people of Brooksville. It mentioned names she recognized, families that still lived in town, families who had struggled for years without ever knowing about this. Her heart pounded. She picked up the notebook and flipped through it. Inside were more details written like a diary. The writer spoke of land deals, agreements, and plans that had never been shared with the town. Some of the names in the notebook were familiar. People whose children and grandchildren now lived ordinary lives in Brooksville, never realizing their past carried such weight. Maria's hands moved to the cloth at the bottom of the box. She unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a small golden key. It was old but still shone faintly under the lantern light. She turned it over in her palm, wondering what it opened. The letters, the notebook, the key, they were all connected. She felt it in her bones. For a long moment, Maria sat still, the lantern flickering beside her. She thought about the people who had mocked her for buying the Cadillac. None of them knew what secrets it held. They saw only rust and dust, but she now held proof that the car was more than just a vehicle. It was a messenger from the past, carrying something that could change the future of Brooksville. The next morning, Maria carried the box inside her house. She did not speak to anyone about it, not even the neighbors who waved at her as she left for the bakery. All day as she served bread and smiled at customers, the thought of the letters and the golden key stayed in her mind. She wanted to read more, to understand every detail, but she also felt a heavy weight. If she shared what she had found, the town would never be the same again. That evening, she sat at her small kitchen table with the box open in front of her. She read more letters, each one pulling her deeper into the story of Brooksville's forgotten past. The writer seemed to have been someone important, perhaps a wealthy man who once lived in the big farmhouse where the Cadillac had been left. The letters suggested he had hidden something valuable for the town, but for reasons not clear, the secret had been buried along with the car. Maria closed her eyes for a moment and imagined the man writing these letters so many years ago. Did he know that one day a young woman like her would stumble upon his hidden words? Did he hope that his truth would finally reach the people it was meant for? As the days passed, Maria began piecing together clues. The notebook had drawings of maps, sketches of certain places in town, and notes about where something might be hidden. The golden key seemed to be part of the mystery, perhaps linked to an old chest or a locked room. The more she read, the more she realized that this was not just about money or land. It was about fairness, promises broken, and chances lost. The town she thought she knew so well had a history that had been forgotten, or maybe even kept hidden on. The golden key rested on Maria's table, shining faintly in the dim light of her lamp. She had spent nights reading through the old letters and notes, but still the mystery was far from solved. Every page hinted at something bigger. The writer of the letters spoke of a promise made to the people of Brooksville, a promise that had never been kept. The key was important, of that she was sure, but she had no idea what it was meant to open. That morning, Maria left for work as usual, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the box. She served bread and cakes to the customers, but each smile felt heavier than usual. She wanted to share her discovery, but she knew she had to be careful. Some people in Brooksville laughed at her for buying the Cadillac. If she told them she had found a box of old letters and a golden key, they would think she was making up stories. When the bakery closed in the evening, Maria walked home slowly. The streets were quiet, the lamps glowing softly, and the air smelled of fresh hay from nearby farms. As she reached her gate, she saw her neighbor, Mr. Harris, leaning on his fence. He was an old man with kind eyes, and he had lived in Brooksville longer than anyone else. "Evening, Maria," he called out. "That old car of yours still standing strong?" Maria smiled politely. "Yes, it is. I've been cleaning it up." Mr. Harris chuckled. "I remember when cars like that were new. Folks treated them like treasures. Your Cadillac, if I'm not mistaken, belonged to the Whitmore family. They had that big farmhouse near the edge of town." Maria's heart skipped a beat. The letter she had found mentioned the name Whitmore more than once. She tried to keep her voice calm. "Do you remember much about them?" The old man rubbed his chin. "Well, the Whitmores were once the richest family in town. Owned a lot of land, had businesses too. But when Mr. Whitmore passed away, things changed. The family moved away and the farmhouse was left behind. Some say there were secrets about their fortune, money that disappeared, promises that were never kept. Folks don't talk about it much anymore." Maria thanked him and went inside, her mind racing. The letters were beginning to make sense. The writer must have been Mr. Whitmore himself, trying to leave something behind for the people of Brooksville. But what had happened to it? And why had no one ever found it? That night, Maria spread the letters and notebook on her table once more. She traced her finger over a sketch in the notebook, a drawing of a door with a keyhole. Beneath it was a note in faded ink. "The answer lies where the town began." She whispered the words again. Where the town began. Brooksville had grown around the old church square, the oldest part of town. Could it be a clue? She stared at the golden key in her hand. The thought of sneaking around the church at night made her nervous, but the notebook seemed to be guiding her toward it. The next evening, Maria gathered her courage. She placed the golden key in her pocket, carried the notebook under her arm, and walked toward the church square. The streets were nearly empty. A few shops still had lights on, but most windows were dark. The old church stood tall, its stone walls worn by time. She stepped quietly onto the grounds, her footsteps echoing on the stone path. The wooden doors were locked, as she expected, but she was not there to enter the church. She walked slowly around the side, guided by the sketch in the notebook. Her lantern lit the walls, revealing ivy climbing up the stones. Then she saw it. At the base of the church wall, half hidden by overgrown bushes, was a small iron door. It was low, almost at ground level, and most people would not notice it unless they looked closely. Her heart pounded as she knelt and brushed away the weeds. The door had a keyhole, its edges rusted but still visible. Maria's hand trembled as she pulled the golden key from her pocket. She pressed it into the keyhole, her breath catching in her chest. At first it would not turn. She wiggled it gently, then tried again. With a soft click, the key turned and the lock released. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow passage that led beneath the church. The air smelled damp and cold, and the sound of dripping water echoed faintly inside. Maria held her lantern high and stepped carefully through the opening. Her shoes tapped softly on the stone floor as she moved forward, her light revealing old bricks and wooden beams. After several steps, the passage opened into a small underground room. In the center stood a large chest covered in dust and cobwebs. Maria's heart raced faster than ever. She approached slowly, her lantern trembling in her hand. The chest was old, made of wood reinforced with iron bands, and it looked as if it had not been touched in decades. She knelt beside it and tried the golden key once more. To her amazement, it fit perfectly. With one slow turn, the chest unlocked. Maria lifted the lid. Inside were stacks of documents, sealed envelopes, and ledgers. At the very bottom lay several bags that clinked when she touched them. She pulled one open and gasped softly. It was filled with coins, shining faintly even after all these years. Tears filled her eyes as she realized what she had found. This was the lost fortune of the Whitmore family, hidden away, meant to be given to the town. It was proof of the letter's truth. It was proof that Brooksville had been denied something that could have changed lives long ago. Maria closed the chest gently and sat back on the cold stone floor. The lantern light flickered across her face as she whispered to herself, "This could change everything." Maria sat on the cold stone floor of the underground room, staring at the open chest. Her lantern flickered, casting shadows on the walls that seemed alive in the silence. The chest was filled with old documents, letters, and bags of coins, all untouched for decades. Her heart raced as she realized the weight of what she had uncovered. For a long time, she simply sat there, her mind torn between excitement and fear. This treasure was not hers. It belonged to the town, to the people whose names she had read in the letters. She thought of the families who had struggled for generations, never knowing that a fortune had been left behind for them. At last, Maria carefully closed the chest. She locked it again with the golden key, then slipped the key back into her pocket. The chest was too heavy for her to carry, and she knew she could not drag it through the streets without raising suspicion. For now, she would leave it hidden and decide what to do next. She made her way back up the passage, out through the small iron door, and locked it behind her. The night air felt cool on her face, and the stars above looked brighter than ever. She walked home quietly, her lantern swinging at her side, her thoughts filled with questions. Who in the town could she trust with this secret? Would people believe her? Would some try to claim the treasure for themselves? The next morning, Maria returned to her usual routine at the bakery. Customers came and went, buying bread and pastries, greeting her with warm smiles. But Maria felt as if she were carrying a great secret on her shoulders. Each time she saw one of the families mentioned in the letters, her chest tightened. She longed to tell them the truth, to let them know what she had found, but she also feared the storm it might bring. That evening, as she locked up the bakery, she saw Mr. Harris again, sitting on his porch. His kind eyes and gentle manner gave her courage. She decided to test the waters. "Mr. Harris," she began softly, "do you think secrets from the past should always stay hidden?" The old man raised his brows. "That depends, Maria. Some secrets are harmless, but others can change lives." "Why do you ask?" Maria hesitated. She could not reveal everything yet, but she gave him a small piece of the truth. "I've been reading about the Whitmore family. It seems they left more behind than people realize." Mr. Harris leaned forward, his interest clear. The Whitmores. People used to say old Mr. Whitmore wanted to do something good for Brooksville, but he passed before he could. His children left and the story faded. But I always wondered if there was more to it." Maria nodded slowly. What if there was proof? Proof that he had kept his promise, but no one ever found it. The old man's eyes sparkled. Then the town has been living in the shadow of a forgotten gift. It would mean hope, Maria. It would mean change. That night, Maria thought hard about his words. She knew she could not keep the secret forever. The treasure belonged to the town, and she was just the one who had discovered it. Still, she needed a plan. The next day, she went back to the Cadillac. She sat in the driver's seat, the notebook open on her lap, and traced the faded lines of the maps again. Each page seemed to guide her toward the same truth. The treasure was meant for Brooksville. The Cadillac had carried the secret for years, waiting for someone to listen. Maria leaned back against the seat and closed her eyes. She imagined what would happen if the truth came out. The families would rejoice, but there would also be arguments. Some might claim more than their share. Others might accuse her of lying. She would need evidence, something undeniable. Her thoughts returned to the documents in the chest. They were the key. If she brought them out carefully, showing people the letters and records, no one could deny the truth. She would have to prepare herself for questions, for doubt, and for the heavy responsibility of being the one who revealed it all. That evening, Maria returned to the church square. The streets were quiet, and the lamps glowed softly as she slipped through the bushes and unlocked the iron door again. She carried a small satchel with her this time. Inside the underground room, she opened the chest and carefully removed a few of. Maria woke early the next morning, her mind already on the papers spread across her kitchen table. The letters and ledgers seemed to glow in the morning light, as if they were calling out to be read again. She picked up one of the letters and traced the words with her finger. The handwriting was neat, steady, and filled with care. It was clear that the writer wanted to leave behind something meaningful, but Maria also knew the truth would not be simple to share. The town was small and people often judged quickly. Some would laugh at her again, just as they had when she bought the Cadillac. Others might accuse her of making up stories. Yet deep inside she felt the responsibility growing stronger. The treasure had been hidden for decades, waiting for the right person to uncover it. She could not keep it to herself. After breakfast, Maria packed the letters into her satchel and walked to the bakery. She wanted to keep her day as normal as possible. Customers greeted her kindly, asking about their usual loaves and cakes, but she noticed herself watching them more closely. The names in the letters echoed in her mind, and she realized how connected everyone in Brooksville was to this secret. When the bakery grew quiet in the afternoon, Maria stepped outside for a short break. The sun was warm and a few children played in the square. As she leaned against the doorway, she saw Clara, a woman from one of the families mentioned in the letters, struggling with a heavy basket. Maria hurried over to help. "Thank you, dear," Clara said with a tired smile. "I don't know what I'd do without kind souls like you." Maria smiled back, but her heart ached. Clara's family had lived in hardship for years. If only she knew what was hidden beneath the church. If only she knew the Whitmores had left something for her family generations ago. The thought made Maria's steps heavier as she returned to the bakery. That evening, she decided it was time to share the truth with someone she trusted. Mr. Harris seemed the best choice. He was wise, kind, and respected in town. If he believed her, perhaps others would too. After closing the bakery, Maria walked to his house. The sun had just set and the old man was sitting on his porch, rocking gently in his chair. He looked up as she approached. "Maria, what brings you here at this hour?" he asked kindly. She hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "I have something to show you, something important. But I need you to promise to listen with an open mind." Mr. Harris gave a small chuckle. "I've lived a long life, my dear. I've learned that the world is full of surprises. Go ahead, I'll listen." Maria sat beside him and opened her satchel. She pulled out the letters and placed them on his lap. These were hidden in the Cadillac. "There's more, but this is only part of it. Please read them." The old man adjusted his glasses and began to read. At first his expression was calm, but as his eyes moved over the words, his brows furrowed. He read one letter, then another, then the ledger. His hands trembled slightly as he closed the last page. "This," he whispered. "This is extraordinary. Do you know what you've found, Maria? This is proof of what people only guessed about. Old Mr. Whitmore did set aside a fortune for this town, but it was lost. No one knew where it went." Maria nodded. "I found a chest beneath the church. It's full of documents and coins. I didn't bring it out because it's too heavy, but I took these papers to show you." Mr. Harris leaned back in his chair, his eyes filled with wonder. "This could change everything, child. But you must be careful. Not everyone will be ready to hear it. Some might try to take it for themselves." Maria looked down at her hands. "That's what I'm afraid of. I want the town to have what was left for them, but I don't know how to share it without causing trouble." The old man placed a gentle hand on hers. "The truth is never easy, Maria, but you have been chosen by fate to bring it to light. The town may resist at first, but in the end they will see. You must gather more proof, make sure everything is clear, and then share it in a way no one can deny." His words gave Maria strength. She returned home that night with renewed determination. She spread the papers on her table once more and studied them closely. Every note, every signature, every detail would be important. Over the next few days, she visited the underground room again. Each time she carried back a few more documents, making sure she had enough evidence to convince the town. Her fear was still there, but it was joined by a growing sense of purpose. One evening, as she placed the golden key on the table beside the letters, Maria whispered to herself, "This is bigger than me. This is for all of us." She knew the time was coming when she would have to stand before the people of Brooksville and reveal the secret the Cadillac had carried for so long. It would not be easy, but she was ready to take the first step. The news spread slowly at first, like a quiet ripple on still water. Maria had not spoken to many people, only to Mr. Harris, but whispers had a way of escaping. Perhaps someone had seen her carrying papers late at night, or perhaps the old man had mentioned something in confidence to a trusted friend. Whatever the reason, by the end of the week, Brooksville was buzzing with curious talk. Maria noticed it most at the bakery. Customers looked at her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Some asked casual questions, their voices light but their eyes sharp. "Maria, you've been busy lately, haven't you?" one woman said while buying bread. "I hear you've been digging around in the church." Maria kept her smile calm. "Just helping with some old repairs," she replied softly. But inside, she knew the town was already turning its gaze on her. Mr. Harris visited her that evening. He sat down at her small table and sighed heavily. "The whispers are growing," he said. "Some people think you've discovered something valuable. Others think you're making up tales to get attention. It won't be long before they come asking directly." Maria's hands tightened around her teacup. "I wanted time to gather everything before telling them. I'm not ready yet." "You may not have much choice," he said kindly. "But remember, the truth has its own strength. If you stand firm, no lie can shake it." That night, Maria could not sleep. She walked around her kitchen, staring at the letters and ledgers. The golden key lay on the table, gleaming faintly in the lamplight. She picked it up and turned it in her hand. Its weight reminded her that this was real no matter what others thought. The next day, as Maria opened the bakery, she found two men waiting outside. They were brothers, known for being curious about everything that happened in town. "We hear you've got something hidden away," one of them said. "Why not tell us? We're all part of this town, aren't we?" Maria kept her voice steady. "When the time is right, I'll explain everything. Until then, please be patient." The brothers exchanged glances but said nothing more. They walked away, muttering under their breath. Maria knew the moment was coming closer. Later that week, Brooksville held its usual gathering at the town hall. People came together to discuss small matters, roads, harvests, and repairs. But this time the air was different. Maria felt it as soon as she stepped inside. Heads turned, conversations hushed, and all eyes seemed to rest on her. The mayor, an elderly man with a firm voice, stood at the front. "It has come to my attention that certain rumors have been traveling through our town," he said. "They concern a hidden treasure, old letters, and secrets left behind by the Whitmore family. I believe Miss Maria may have something to say about this." The room fell silent. Maria's heart pounded, but she forced herself to step forward. She carried her satchel, heavy with the documents she had gathered. For a moment she closed her eyes, hearing Mr. Harris's words in her mind. "The truth has its own strength." "I did find something," she said clearly. "I found letters and papers hidden inside the Cadillac. They spoke of wealth set aside for this town, locked away beneath the church. I have seen it with my own eyes." "It is real," gasps echoed through the hall. Some people leaned forward eagerly, while others frowned in doubt. One man stood up sharply. "Are we supposed to believe this? That you, of all people, stumbled upon a treasure no one else ever found?" Maria met his gaze without fear. "I didn't stumble upon it. I was meant to find it, and I have the proof." She opened her satchel and laid the letters and ledgers on the table. The mayor and several others leaned in to read. The room grew quiet as the documents were passed around. The careful handwriting, the old dates, and the official signatures spoke louder than Maria ever could. Murmurs filled the air, some astonished, some doubtful, some hopeful. Finally, Clara, the woman Maria had helped with a basket days before, stood up. "If this is true, then it means our families were not forgotten. It means someone cared enough to leave us something. We cannot dismiss this." Her words carried weight, and many nodded in agreement. Still, a few remained skeptical. The mayor raised his hand for silence. "Miss Maria, we thank you for your honesty, but such a claim must be proven beyond doubt. We will gather a small group tomorrow, and you will lead us to this chest you speak of. Only then will the truth be known." Maria nodded, though her stomach tightened with nerves. The moment she had feared was here. Tomorrow, the secret room beneath the church would no longer be hers alone. That night, as she prepared for bed, Maria felt a storm of emotions. Fear, hope, and determination swirled within her. She stood by her window looking at the quiet town. In a few hours, the past and present would meet, and Brooksville would never be the same again. She whispered. The morning sun rose gently over Brooksville, painting the sky in soft shades of gold and pink. Yet the calm beauty outside did little to quiet the storm inside Maria's heart. She woke early, her thoughts restless. Today was the day she would no longer carry the secret alone. Today the whole town would see the truth with their own eyes. She dressed carefully, putting on a plain blue dress, then wrapped the golden key in a small piece of cloth before placing it in her pocket. The key felt heavier than usual, as if it carried the weight of history itself. She took a deep breath and stepped outside. The Cadillac stood quietly in front of her house, the morning light glinting off its polished edges. For the first time, it seemed proud rather than rusty and forgotten. When Maria arrived at the town hall, people were already gathered. The mayor stood at the front with several council members. Clara was there, standing close to the door, her eyes warm with support. Mr. Harris sat on a bench, looking both anxious and hopeful. Many other townsfolk filled the hall, whispering to one another. Some carried suspicion on their faces, others curiosity, and a few even carried excitement. The mayor cleared his throat. "Miss Maria," he said, "are you prepared to guide us to the place you spoke of?" Maria nodded. "Yes, I am ready." A group of 10 people was chosen to go with her. The mayor, 2 council members, Clara, Mr. Harris, and a few townsfolk joined the party. The rest of the town followed at a distance, eager not to be left behind. Together they walked down the narrow streets, their footsteps echoing in the morning silence. The church stood tall at the edge of town, its white walls glowing softly in the sun. Maria felt her pulse quicken as they approached the heavy wooden doors. She led them inside, the cool air wrapping around them. The scent of old wood and candle wax filled the space, as if the walls themselves had been keeping secrets for many years. Maria walked down the aisle, her steps steady but her heart racing. She stopped at the corner near the pulpit where she had found the loose stone days before. Bending down, she placed her hand on it and turned to the group. "This is where it begins," she said quietly. Several people leaned closer, their faces tight with doubt. Maria pressed against the stone and slowly it shifted just as it had before. Gasps rose from the group as the hidden passage was revealed. A dark staircase descended into the ground, the air cool and faintly damp. "Bring lanterns," the mayor instructed. Soon the warm glow of several lights filled the space, chasing away the shadows. Maria led the way down the steps, her hand brushing the cold stone walls. The group followed closely, their voices hushed. The air grew thicker, and the sound of dripping water echoed faintly. After several moments, they reached the underground room. The chest still sat in the center, its wooden frame strong despite the years. The metal edges gleamed faintly in the lantern light. Maria's breath caught in her throat. She had been here before, but this time felt different. This time the town stood witness. "This is it," she whispered. The mayor stepped forward. "Open it, Miss Maria. Let us see with our own eyes." Maria reached into her pocket and pulled out the wrapped key. Slowly she unwrapped it, the golden surface glowing in the flickering light. She held it for a moment, then bent down and fitted it into the lock. With a firm turn, the chest clicked open. The lid creaked as she lifted it. Inside lay stacks of papers tied with ribbons, leather-bound ledgers, and small cloth bags filled with silver coins. The lantern light sparkled on the metal, sending a hush through the room. "It is real," Clara whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. Mr. Harris let out a trembling breath. "All these years hidden right beneath us." The mayor carefully picked up one of the ledgers and flipped through the pages. The handwriting was neat and clear, detailing amounts of money, names of families, and instructions for the future of Brooksville. He looked up, his voice firm. "This is a record of wealth set aside for the people of this town. It was meant to help rebuild after hardship, to care for families, and to strengthen the community. It has been waiting here for decades." Excited murmurs spread among the group. Some faces showed relief, others awe. Even the doubters were silent now, their suspicion washed away by the sight of silver and the weight of old words written with care. Maria stood quietly, watching the scene unfold. A warmth spread through her chest. She had carried the secret carefully, and now it no longer belonged only to her. It belonged to the entire town. "We must guard this carefully," the mayor continued. "It is not only treasure, but also trust from the past. Together we will decide how best to use it." The group nodded in agreement, though their minds were already racing with thoughts of what could be done. Some imagined better roads, others schools or a proper library. Dreams long buried began to rise again. As they climbed back up to the church, the sunlight spilling in through the high windows seemed brighter than before. The townsfolk waiting outside leaned forward eagerly as the group emerged. The mayor raised his hand. "It is true," he announced. "There was treasure beneath the church. And it is not just gold and silver, it is hope left behind for all of us." Cheers broke out, echoing across the square. People embraced one another, children laughed, and even those who had doubted Maria smiled with relief. For the first time in many years, Brooksville felt alive with possibility. Maria stood quietly at the edge of the crowd, her eyes shining. She had been mocked for her old Cadillac, yet it had led her to this moment. She whispered to herself, "It was never just a car. It was a key to our future." And though she spoke softly, in her heart she knew the whole town was beginning a new chapter because of it. The days that followed the discovery beneath the church were unlike anything Brooksville had seen in many years. The town, once quiet and filled with whispers, now buzzed with voices of hope and planning. Neighbors who rarely spoke to each other gathered in the square to discuss possibilities. Children played with brighter laughter, sensing the joy around them even if they did not fully understand. Maria found herself at the center of attention. People who had once mocked her old Cadillac now greeted her with respect. Some apologized for their harsh words, while others simply smiled warmly, their eyes filled with gratitude. Maria accepted it all with calmness, never boasting, always reminding them that the treasure had been left for everyone. The mayor called for a special town meeting to decide how the funds would be used. The hall was filled to the edges that evening, lanterns glowing on the walls, the air charged with energy. Maria sat quietly near the front, the golden key resting on the table before her, a symbol of what had been uncovered. The mayor stood tall, holding the ledger in his hands. "This record shows us not only wealth but also purpose," he said. "The Whitmore family wished for this money to strengthen Brooksville, not to be hoarded by a few. We must honor that wish. So let us decide together. What does our town need most?" Voices rose in suggestion. One man called for better roads so farmers could bring their goods to market more easily. A woman suggested building a school with proper books and teachers, so children would have brighter futures. Others spoke of a library, a new well, or a small clinic for those in need. For hours the townsfolk debated, not with anger but with passion. It was clear to all that the money could not be wasted. At last Clara stood and spoke, her voice carrying across the room. "This treasure came to us through Maria, through her faith in something everyone else dismissed. Let us use it not for one thing alone but for many. Let us share it wisely so every family feels its touch." The room fell quiet and slowly heads began to nod. The mayor smiled and closed the ledger. "Then it is agreed. The funds will be divided carefully. We will improve our roads, build a new school, and begin a library. A part will also be saved for those who fall on hard times. In this way, the gift will keep giving." Cheers filled the hall. People clapped their hands and Maria felt tears gather in her eyes. She had dreamed of helping the town, but she had never imagined such unity. For the first time in many years, Brooksville felt like a true family. The work began almost at once. Men and women joined together, clearing land and laying stones for new roads. Carpenters planned the schoolhouse, while others donated books for the future library. Maria helped at every step, carrying supplies, baking bread for workers, and writing letters to nearby towns asking for teachers. Her days were full, but her heart was light. The Cadillac, once a target of laughter, now stood proudly in front of her home. Children pointed at it with wide eyes, calling it the car that saved the town. Maria would smile and let them climb inside, telling them gently that sometimes the most ordinary things could hide the greatest secrets. Mr. Harris often visited, his steps slow, but his eyes bright. One afternoon he said, "You have given Brooksville more than treasure, Maria. You have given it faith. People now believe that hidden in our lives are things worth discovering, if only we have patience to look." Maria nodded, her gaze resting on the horizon. "I only followed what I felt was right," she said softly. The rest was waiting to be found. Months passed and Brooksville changed. The new schoolhouse stood tall and cheerful, filled with children eager to learn. The library opened its doors with shelves lined by books both old and new. The roads became smoother, making travel easier for everyone. The town once overlooked and small began to shine with